Denise, you ready?
Ready.
All right. Okay, everybody. Hi, my name is Jason De La Rosa. I'm the Director of Career and Professional Development here at St. Edward's University. And tonight I'm going to be leading us out on our very first of many Topper Career Talks. So this series is brought to you by our Alumni Association as well as the Career and Professional Development Office here on the Hilltop. And so each month we're going to be bringing you information on a different career-related talk for you, our wonderful Hilltopper alumni. Before we get going, I just want to thank a few folks. So first off, thank you to the Alumni Association for co-hosting this wonderful event, or what I hope will be a wonderful event. I also want to thank our co-host for the evening, Dr. Jack Musselman, Associate Professor of Philosophy. And of course, thank you very, very much to our alumni for joining us and taking time out of your day and your busy schedules. So you'll be seeing me kind of glance to my right because that's where my notes are. So my apologies for that, but bear with me. It looks like a few other people are coming in. So before I jump on in, just want to let y'all know a few things. We do have all participants muted in the meantime. So as questions pop up, you can certainly use the chat box to send questions to your host. And then we'll kind of rearrange, or we'll arrange those by subject matter and field those questions towards the end of the event. And then also, oh no, that's actually it. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and jump on in, right? So what brings us here tonight, right? We are going to be talking to you a little bit about a mission-oriented job search. So one thing to be mindful of is, regardless of economic times and what's going on in the world around us, we all need to sustain our livelihood, right? We all need to find a way to make sure that we are surviving and persisting. And it's going to vary from person to person and from time to time. Sometimes that's going to be through a job that gets us through a temporary rough patch. Other times that mission-oriented job search is really going to take us through kind of this idea of finding our bliss and finding our passion and helping us find a career that we never ever want to leave, right? And sometimes it's something in between those two. So what we plan on discussing tonight is the idea of being able to utilize both our university mission and a little bit of our own personal value sets to help us work through that process regardless of which situation we all might be in right now. So before we get to the mission of the university and our personal value set, I do want to touch on kind of this overarching theme that's going to be our constant thread tonight of Ick-ee-guy. I'm sure I'm slaughtering the pronunciation of that, but it is a Japanese concept that means a reason for being. Or another way to think about this is the reason that you get out of bed in the morning, right? And so sometimes that reason to get out of the bed in the morning is about our job or our career. Other times it's about our family, our values, the other things that we have going on in our life. One thing to be mindful of is that this is fluid and it can change. What I thought that I wanted to do with my life at the age of 7 was very different with the thing I wanted to do at the age of 15, 22, and even 30 is very different than what I want now. So I think in my younger years, I was kind of super obsessed with this idea of wanting to get rich. But as I grew and matured, I had trouble reconciling this idea of chasing lots and lots of money with the things I was passionate about, right? So when I think about what I was passionate about, the constant themes were social justice and education, and of course, being able to spend time with my loved ones and the people that meant the world to me. Is a commonly used term, but it is a relative term. It means different things to different people, of course, at different times. So I've had to think through not only what I wanted to do, but also where I wanted to do it. And I think that that's one of the things that's really been great for me, having worked on the Hilltop for going on, oh no, I'm probably wrapping up about year 16 in probably my 4th or 5th different position at the university. So I think that this is a great way to kick off this series to talk about mission and kind of what it means to those of us who have worked here and those of us who have attended the university and are part of the community. And it's really, really nice and comfortable to talk about chasing our passion, chasing things we love, and having the freedom to do that. But that's not always the case, right? Truth be told, I've certainly had jobs that just paid the bills. Well, that this was the thing that I was going to put on the resume for a short period of time, be able to build up a new skill set that I didn't have before, or enhance a skill set that I had before, and then move on to the next thing. So what we're going to talk about is this idea of how do we reconcile and converge, or maybe just pick the one or two things out of these four concepts that are going to drive us in our job search right now. So the four main things we're going to go through tonight and how we converge and reconcile those is the idea of what do I love? What am I good at? What does the world need right now? And of course, what's going to pay me to get those things done? So right now, I want everybody in the room to sit down and think through the skills you've acquired over time. Whether you've been in a job or think about the skills that you've acquired. Maybe those skills were picked up in the classroom. Maybe those skills were picked up in a service project that you did. Maybe they're picked up in research. Maybe you have ideas of communication, teamwork, analytical writing, any number of things. But I want you to think of the mission of St. Edward's University and how those skill sets and those values showed up in your class projects, the service work, the research, and all these other things. So I'm going to be quiet for just a little bit here. Jack, Dr. Musselman, you've taught several students over the years. Talk to us a little about some of the common threads you've seen in terms of skills and values from our students when you've seen them go out onto the job market for careers and jobs, regardless of what major they were in.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone, for showing up. Sure. So I kind of like these bullet points and that Venn diagram. Well, not all of them, maybe all the time, is where I've seen the students past and present. So I've been teaching since 2002, but only on the faculty since 2007. So, you know, if I had to add it up, it's several thousand students. I don't know the exact number. And one of the things I say to them all the time is, look, you've got to have some desire to do the job. You've got to be good enough at it to, like make a go of it. Hopefully it's fulfilling a need. And of course, you got to be paid to do it. None of us are going to win the lottery. And I'm thinking, can I put my money where mouth is and prove that? And actually, this comes up all the time, especially for me as a philosopher, because even my own parents are like, what the hell are you going to do with that? And I'm saying, well, nobody takes ethics expecting to go teach ethics. That's like 1 in 100 of our majors who go out in the world. But if they've taken my class and Mark's logic class and Peter Wake's history class and Steve's philosophy of science class, they're passionate about those things. They learn it for their own sake. And then they discover when they put a resume together and go on the market, oh, I'm good at critical thinking and reasoning and talking about values in the world and talking about what matters in the world. And weirdly, I didn't tell them we were doing that, right? That was just stuff we were doing while we were studying philosophy or sociology or chemistry. And so when they communicate with me 5, 10 years out, they'll say, I was in a meeting where someone had to talk about ethics and I remembered something Mark Cherry said, or I was in a meeting, we were worried about social impact. And I remember what Rachel Neal said in my sociology class. So from my perspective, if the students are doing the stuff that's in our mission, critical inquiry, engaging the social issues that matter, opening to people and languages of different cultures and places, they're going to get at the stuff that's on this PowerPoint checklist. Now it's hard to construct that, right? I mean, and I don't know if I should too. I was a visitor up at Southwestern and couldn't really go very far away and ended up being the faculty development associate. And all my grad school friends are like, what? You trained to be a philosopher? And then I was like, well, wait a minute. I enjoy watching other people teach. I'm good enough to take a step away and tell them about stuff that they're teaching. The college obviously needs that because the director at the time couldn't do all of it. And it was a half-time job with benefits, which was better than the visitor job that I had. So I took it. And I'm like, gosh, I get to go to college for 2 years without doing any papers. This is great. I'm doing all of this stuff at a more mature level. And eventually what ended up happening was I was having lunch with Robin Eanes, the then director of the teaching center, and the philosophers came in. It was the Treehouse down the street, Italian restaurant, and they're like, "Can you teach?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I go, "Do you have college course evaluations?" And I'm like, "Here, take them." I was teaching a semester later, and 13 years later, I'm now an ethics center person. Well, I was on its way out. But that's another story. I'm a philosopher, and I'm actually doing it. So, in my view, if you can combine these things with the skills that you learn in not only classroom, I'm glad Jason mentioned, intramural clubs and sports and theater. I mean, some of my theater students are some of the best public speakers I've ever seen. So I think if you can combine these things without being like noticing that you're doing them, and then all of a sudden you're saying to an employer, I can do this and this and this, the proof's in the pudding. And I don't know if we can show that webpage that I sent you, Jason, the one from the AAC&U. So there's an American Association of Colleges and Universities does an employer survey frequently. I think the results from the last one's 2018. And the 2018 survey shows the exact stuff that liberal arts students learn, not so that they would necessarily say, I've learned it and I'm ready for a job, but that learned it and then also they are ready for a job. Employers say over and over and over, here, I don't know if you're able to share it, Jason. Can
you see it, Jack? Can
you share it?
Well, I have it on my screen share.
Okay, let me get back. I was trying to open it up thinking you weren't sharing it.
You're good.
Because I don't see it on mine. It's in the chat, I guess. And if people go down to Fulfilling the American Dream, Liberal Arts Education in the Future, age 12 to 14 is when they do the graph that shows everything. It says this is what employers want. Let's see, oral communication, check. You had to take comm classes. Critical thinking, ethical judgment, working in teams. Everyone works in groups, even though they hate it when they're students. Working independently, written comm, real world application. All of that stuff is the liberal arts core. So in my judgment, what students are getting and what they're saying when they're out is, and then when we go out, we can talk about that stuff, and that's what employers say they want. So it's sort of a win-win-win or match, match, match.
Yeah, and one thing to note along with that, right, is that this is something that when you look at regular surveys year after year, these things are consistent, right? So the top 4 tend to pop up on a regular basis of critical thinking skills, effective communication, ethical judgment, decision-making. These are regular things that employers seek regardless of where you are in the job search process, whether you're fresh out of college or if you've been in the job market for 20, 30 years. Those skill sets don't ever really go out of style. And I think that that's one thing we've done a great job of on the Hilltop. Jack, I believe you had mentioned to me a few minutes ago or previously about a peer review article that you did with the AACU. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you want to share that too. Did I send that to you and to? Oh gosh, I can't remember. 2016, so it was Corey Locke, University Programs, Chad Long, Political Science, Susan Lochran, University Programs, and Michael Sacklello, Math. We were trying to figure out if being transparent about our learning objectives in the class and versus not being transparent would help students learn those very skills we just talked about better because they knew they were the skills up front they were supposed to learn. And weirdly and counterintuitively, no, there's no real good evidence, maybe it wasn't broad enough study, that's saying we are training X and Y today and this month helps people learn X and Y later because they see that they're the skills that are happening. But what we did learn, and this was sort of interesting, was we were already really transparent about that. I mean, part of the study about being transparent about your learning goals, helping you teach better those goals or not, was we were already so transparent about it as a get the goals as transparent was counterintuitive. And so the nice thing that I think that we learned was students were getting the skills and they were getting them because even if we foregrounded them, and most of us did, it was the focus on the skills that matter and not telling them they were getting them. And this is something that's consistent with my chair. He always says when we meet as a department, I'm not teaching critical thinking so that someone could be a manager or an accountant. I'm just teaching critical thinking. And if you focus on the skill, people will find a use for it later. So I might tell them I'm transparent about it, but I don't have to. I just have to focus on the skill. And that's one of the things we learn is that we're all pretty transparent about the goals. And on the other side of the equation is that by the end, the students are like, yeah, I knew what they were because you kind of told me what they were and I knew we were doing them. But the important thing was we were doing them, right? Anyway, so there's the study. I mean, we can put that in the chat for people to look at as well.
So you've touched on this a little bit. So, you know, you've been teaching, help a student or one of our alumni pull out some buzzwords or specific skill sets they picked up in one of your ethics courses. What are some that immediately come to mind that you would think to put on like a resume profile or a resume or a LinkedIn profile or something like that?
Well, that's a good question. I might, when I do ethics classes, say, you know, what you should be focusing on is the intent of the actor, the consequences to other agents, the transparency of the reasoning so you can sort of test it in public. And certainly any kind of task you would do in an organization of any kind, right? Why are people doing it? How does it turn out? Are the reasons transparent and public enough that they sustain critical inquiry? I think those are all the classic elements. I know if you're in a business ethics class, you do stakeholder analysis, right? Like who's affected? Well, that's consequences and outcome. So even if I don't do stakeholder analysis in my ethics classes, I don't teach business ethics. I certainly would say, why did they do it? How did it turn? Because people in different situations have maybe different rules apply. Are they rational agents? I mean, I don't blame my 2-year-old for doing things that I blame my 15-year-old for doing. So I think that whole framework you can map onto any situation. And I've had people who've been in my classes, again, maybe it's not often, every 5 or 6 years, they'll write back and go, I was in that meeting, and someone asked about the impact, and I was able to brainstorm things because we did that in your class. It's like, great. That's not why I taught it, but I'm glad you used it that way. That's perfect.
Thanks so much. So I want to transition a little bit back to the 4 key points, right? So the idea of asking yourself, what is it that I love? Right? So the answer might be, well, I love money, but it might be that you love other things too, right? So you know, Jack, you've been a member of the Health Professions Advisory Committee, you're on the Pre-Law Council. And so I talked to some of my friends who are lawyers, for instance, and not to pick on the friends who are lawyers are like, you know, what I started out doing this for is not the reason why I keep doing it. We thought when we got into law, we were going to do a different type of law. We thought we were going to be social justice warriors, but now they're doing corporate law that is not quite what they want. They're like, you know, I don't love it anymore. I'm good at it. I'm getting paid pretty well for it, but I don't love what I do. And a lot of them have kind of, after 10, 15, 20 years, are like, I'm ready to transition out of this and do something that's more of a passion project for me, something I'm enjoying, I'm good at as well. So I really want people to be reflective in this process. Sit down, think about what it is that you love. And sometimes it takes a conversation with somebody else who's objective, who can have that conversation, help you parse that out. I know sometimes I've got my certain group of friends that if I want to be reassured of an idea that I have, I'll talk to but sometimes I'll talk to somebody who I maybe don't know as well, but I know they're very direct and honest. And I think that's kind of where the Career and Professional Development Office can come into play. Come and set an appointment up with us. Come and talk to one of the career counselors and say, you know what, I'm really struggling with the idea of what it is I'm excited about. And talk to somebody who's objective, who can walk you through those things, walk you through some different assessments that will maybe ask some hard questions that you haven't really thought through yet, or maybe you haven't thought through them in a while, or you've been afraid of the answer. What am I good at? Well, we think that's an easy one to cover, right? I think that after a while, we tend to have a pretty decent sense of what we're good at. But for instance, I've met plenty of people in my time who are like, I'm an excellent read of other people. I know exactly what's going on with other folks. I can read a room. And then wrong. So again, I think having somebody that you can kind of talk through and say, hey, when you think about me, what do you think are the top 3 to 5 characteristics I bring to the table? On the flip side of that, what are the top 3 to 5 weaknesses you think I might bring to a place? Jack and I have had the pleasure of team interviewing some of our pre-med students for the past couple of years. And that is one of the questions we typically ask. Well, what are the top 3 things you're best at? What are your 3 biggest weaknesses? And then what we'll see through the course of that interview is, oh, they said that they have a way with words, but they're tripping up and they clearly don't understand the definition of that word. Or these things that they think is a weakness for them is actually quite a big strength. They just need to learn how to package it, right? So while we might think that, hey, there's things I'm very good at, let's really sit down and kind of map out what that means. What does that look like in practice? When you talk to your colleagues, your supervisors, your friends, the people who know you best in the workplace, what would they say about you? And I think this might be a good lesson to learn. I've certainly just randomly texted friends from time to time who I have the pleasure of working with and saying, hey, if you were to sum my work up in 3 to 5 words, what would it be? And sometimes I'm surprised and sometimes I'm not. And then I have to think through, well, what context do they know my work? Right? So Jack might know some very different things about how I work than Denise, right? But we've all worked together and we've seen different things that we bring to the table. So I would encourage all of you in the room to really think through, what is it that I love and what is it that I'm good at? And is there a cross section there? So let's start with those 2 points. This third point, I think, is a little bit harder to wrap our heads around, especially in light of current circumstances. Think about though, as the world continues to change around us and the world continues to change, how do we change and adapt with it? Right? So when I think about the students I've had the pleasure of working with over the year and the alumni that I think are in this room right now, the ability to adapt and persevere is something that I think is such a strong thing with our Hilltoppers. But sometimes, and I think I've been guilty of this myself, sometimes like, oh, I don't want to do that thing. I think I'm above that, or I think I can do better than that. But sometimes it will take a humbling moment to kind of take a step back and think, you know what? When I'm really confronting what is going on, are there gaps that need to be filled in this world that I have the skill set to fill? It may not be the thing that I want to do forevermore. It may not be my forever career, but maybe it's that job this exact moment, right? So I'm going to kick this back to Jack for a second. When you look at what the world needs, what comes to mind in terms of skill sets? And also the second part of that is, how do those align with a St. Edward's education?
Well, wow, that's just a $64,000 question. That's a big question. So, I mean, for me, the skill sets, and maybe this is kind of completely obvious, is, and it's probably the most important thing, and I can't believe I'm saying this as a philosopher of logic, the most important thing that matter, are the sort of soft and social skills. Because every single discussion I run, whether someone says the off-the-wall crazy thing that like I'm going to have to really reach to try to connect that to what we're talking about, or someone's dead on, but they won't talk very much because they're an introvert. For me, it's managing that social space that's the hardest, because you can have the writing and the critical thinking and oral presentation and social justice orientation. I'm not against any of those. Like, they're all important. In that room, forget it. So I think the best thing that students might learn from in the classroom and in clubs and being a student intern or a student worker is, how do you actually get along with others when you disagree and get something done? And I think every classroom does that really well. I think the clubs do that really well, the sports, the theater. So, and that's something you probably can read in 2 minutes, right? Like, I can't tell you the number of philosophy interviews I had before coming to St. Ed's and the way it works in the academy in the before times was you had to go to a conference in a hotel and you were 4 of you in a room, and like the chair of the department where you're moving to is asleep. The assistant chair is like yelling at you because he thinks you're wrong. and you're thinking, I need a job, so maybe I put up with that. But then you're in the next hotel room for the next interview, and they're really nice, and you're like, okay, I'm home here. I don't have to agree with all of you, but you actually like have the social, you're not raised by wolves, right? Even though you're a philosopher. A resume for a faculty member and know like in 2 seconds they'd fit here. But until you get that socialization, right, that you're in the room talking, you don't know. But when you know that, you know that. So I think the social skills that students learn, maybe the people out there in the business and comm world and politics would agree, that's almost the most important thing, because if you can't do that, all the other skills won't manifest, right? They won't get practiced because you can't get along with others.
And I want to touch on something you just mentioned a moment ago. You know, I think that a lot of times we'll be in our interviews for the med school students, and somebody will say that their introverted nature is a weakness, right? And so you're talking about the idea that social skills is a great strength, but sometimes that implies that being introverted is a weakness, which I know neither of us agree with. So if you're an alum or a student saying, you know what, I am a little bit more introverted by nature, how would you package that as a strength?
Well, that's a good question, because my partner is an extreme introvert, Jenny of an there it is. And one of the things I like about the introverts, and I think this is the way I would package it, is they're thoughtful and careful listeners, and they don't jump in where angels fear to tread, right? So when we have a conversation, Jenny and I have to practice listening, because I'm likely to want to say, here's an answer, here's an answer. But when she listens, she really listens. And I'm thinking, when she tells me something, it's going to be dead on, right? Because she took her time before she decided to expend mental energy on like being out in society. And she's the same in committee meetings. I mean, she's the same on campus. I think when she speaks, people are like, since she's kind of a quiet introvert, that's going to matter, because she's going to be targeted and strategic about when she's going to spend her personal energy. So I think an introvert should be saying, I'm not going to waste anyone's time. We're in a meeting. I'm going to say the thing that matters when it matters, because, you know, that's me. I'd like to wait until I have something to say. That sounds like someone who's efficient. Now, maybe that's all post hoc, right? It's all rationalization about making an introvert sound like the best person in the room. But if I was an introvert, that's how I'd sell it.
Well, and I think going along with that, right, there's a certain degree of intentionality, which I think is very important in your job search process. Sometimes there's a time and place to kind of cast a wide net. And then there's other moments where we want to be very intentional about what it is that we're going for, right? So we don't want to apply to the same company for 20, 30 different jobs that look very different from one another, because it'll be like, oh, the HR manager is going to be like, well, this person's just shooting for anything. But if you're targeting it towards a specific job, or certain jobs are kind of in the same wheelhouse, that intentionality is there. So I know I kind of pivoted from that to a bigger picture, but thank you for the transition, Jack. I think going along with that, though, I keep hearing this right now, and I think this is a common thread that I hear every once in a while, that there is this common misconception that there are no jobs. The reality is there are a lot of jobs, and like I said before, it might just be that those jobs are not our forever career. So people might be saying, Jason, you say there's all these jobs. Well, where do we find these jobs? Where do they exist? How do I apply for them? What do I do with them? So first off, I got to make a quick plug. So we have our Hilltop Careers database. We update that thing a few times a week. Actually, for the past 2.5, 3 weeks, I've been going in and updating that thing daily. So today I personally approved 50 positions today, ranging from entry-level jobs to true career trajectory jobs all across the country. And I didn't even get through all the pending jobs. So I need to go back into it with the rest of the team tomorrow and keep approving these things. But you have access to the Hilltop Careers database as an alum. I think a lot of current students underutilize it. And I think a lot of alumni are like, oh, that's not for me. Those are like internships and entry-level jobs. No. There's a lot of heavy-hitting stuff in there that I would encourage people to look at. If you don't know how to access it, I'll give you our contact information at the end of the presentation tonight, but I would really encourage people to start with Hilltop Careers database. The other thing that I really, really like that is kind of on my top of my list right now is this live user-generated hiring and freezing list from this company called Candor. So let's go ahead and bring that over. And of course, we can send out, oops, where did it go? We can send out some of these links later on, and they all do live on the career and professional development website. But we look at this. This is user-generated data. And they'll say, here are all these companies. And we may not know some of them, so it's going to take a little bit of research. But there's 8,077 records in here of companies hiring. You'll be able to see which ones are hiring for what positions. So that's one piece. There are a lot of other things. So Indeed, I'm going to just drag them over. This is an Indeed site, but it has companies hiring now, and they're updating their website regularly of who's hiring at the moment in time, at this moment in time. We have a running PDF on the Career and Professional Development Office website that we're updating every single Monday of what are the new spots and what are the new websites that are highlighting who's hiring and who's freezing. And some of them will also include salary data, so I would encourage y'all to take a look at that stuff. Let's see here. A few other things to think about. Whatever city you're in, your local chamber of commerce tends to have a pretty updated list of who's hiring. They may not always have notices of who's freezing, but the hiring data tends to be pretty on point, especially in your more major metropolitan areas. I would encourage people to look into LinkedIn. Right, so look at the students and the alumni and everybody who's graduated from St. Edward's University. Connect to your faculty and staff on LinkedIn, because we have a lot of people, but if I haven't heard from you in 3 or 4 years and I don't know you're looking for a job, I may not be able to connect you to the right person. But I've had a few serendipitous moments where one alum writes me on LinkedIn, they're like, hey, we're looking for something at our company. They're gonna put it in a handshake, but they haven't gotten there, or in Hilltop Careers, but they haven't gotten there yet. But if I know that, you know, person A just graduated, they're looking for a job in this industry, and then alumni B is like, I really need somebody, it might be easier to just connect those folks. You know, there's always the idea that a lot of jobs. So I just want y'all to be mindful of that and utilize the connections that you've made on the Hilltop, whether you were here at the same time or not. Another one that is kind of just one of my personal favorites right now is Bumble Biz. So I think a lot of us think about Bumble as a dating site and a dating app. There are different ways to use Bumble. So you can sign on to Bumble and use Bumble Biz and create a profile for professional networking. I think that one's being used by a lot of young professionals right now, just for networking. There may or may not be a job, but think about the long game. Maybe you've made a connection with somebody in a certain industry that you're trying to break into. And maybe you've made a connection of somebody who can introduce you to something even if they don't have something themselves at their company. So those are all things to be mindful of. But the one thing I kind of want to leave with on some of these ideas is that some of the jobs that you're going to find may not be the things that we would ever want to make our gig for the next 15, 20 years. But it might be the thing that gets us through tough economic times and helps us develop some strong skill sets. One of the conversations I've had on an ongoing basis with my own team in the career office, as well as people in other career centers at universities, is that, you know, innovation is sometimes driven by necessity or desperation, right? So maybe you've been looking for the right time to create a new service or product that fits the needs of our world and our climate right now. The great thing is maybe that thing also gets you paid, right? So this might be a time to think about what can you do, but use your connections, use who you know and what you know. At the end of the day, there's really no magical answer, and things are going to continue to change day by day and week by week. So maybe we can take a stronger step in controlling the things that we're able to control. So what are those things? You know, having a fresh, updated LinkedIn profile is a very, very good thing, right? It's always nice, or maybe this is just me, I always like to see, you know, 70 people looked at your profile this week on LinkedIn. It means something than a like on Facebook for me personally. So I'm like, okay, what is it this person's bringing to the table? Oh, hey, this is an alum I haven't talked to in a while. maybe they're going for something and I might get an email from them. I might not, but I'll reach out to them anyways and say, hey, what's going on? And that might lead to a conversation that helps out another alumni at some point in time. I would also encourage people to make sure that you have customized cover letters and resume for every job you apply for, no matter how big or how small that thing is. And certainly as an alum, you have full access to the Career and Professional Development Office for life. So schedule a time to meet with a career counselor and make sure that I want you to continue to think of the fluidity of our circumstances. Like I've said before, maybe the perfect job exists that will allow us to combine what we love, what we're good at, what the world needs while getting us paid, but it might not. So with that, right, I want to be mindful of time and turn it over to some questions when we get there. But think about some of these other resources, right? So visit the career website. There's a wealth of information there. Just as a reminder, we will work with you on your resumes, your LinkedIn profiles, cover letters. When the time comes, not if the time comes, but when the time comes, we'll work with you on interview preparation, right? I think that myself, I can get a little bit rusty. Interview prep is one of those skill sets that if you don't use it, you can get rusty with it. So I would encourage you to utilize some preparation and do more than just talking to yourself in the mirror. Of job and internship listings. And of course, this link is going to take you, well, I guess you can't click it, but this is going to take you to that PDF that I spoke about earlier that lives on our website that has a whole bunch of information. So some of this is about internships, but it's that freezing hiring form. What to do if your job is affected by COVID. So if you were recently let go from your place of employment, this has some tips and resources. If you are a new graduate, these 14 companies are hiring entry-level positions. So there's a lot of info. We have about 3 to 5 pages of stuff. And as we see a source that gets added, we'll add it to our database. If there's something that we feel is not the best anymore and it's dried up a bit, we'll let you know, but these are all time-stamped. So you'll see like, hey, let's start from the top and go for the more fresh things. And then, all right. So, the other thing is we are very, very ready to see alumni in our virtual appointments. Obviously, we're not doing this in person, but we all have Zoom rooms. You can meet with us. We're happy to help and we would love to see you. So the best way to do that and set up a time to meet with us is to email seucareer@steadwards.edu. We are monitoring that email throughout the day. And so if you want to set up an appointment, just go ahead and send us an email and say, hey, I'd love to meet with one of your career counselors. You can also call us at 512-448-8530. Just be warned that number will go to a voicemail, and then somebody's checking that about every hour in returning one call. So if you do call, please make sure you leave a voicemail. It's not that we're ignoring you, but we will call you back pretty soon. And just know that that number is probably going to come from somebody's personal cell phone number, or it might be, we're probably going to call you back within an hour or two. Of course, our career website has a lot of information, so I would encourage you to visit that. And of course, I mentioned this before, these Topper Career Talks are not over. We're going to continue going with these. And so tonight's been a little bit more of a philosophical conversation about finding your bliss and finding your passion. As we kind of go through month by month, we're going to start to dig into some concrete skill sets that are really going to help you strengthen and polish up what's going on for you in your job hunt and your job search. So next month, June 24th, we'll be talking about using LinkedIn for a networking edge. July 29th, we'll be covering getting to the interview. So we'll cover a lot of different ground there. We'll cover tips on writing resumes, cover letters, and some other things that are going to get you noticed to get you an interview. August 20th, we're going to talk about having a career makeover and how you kind of shift gears a bit and you leave the career you've had for a while and move into something new. So that is it as far as the presentation goes, but I think we probably have a few questions. So I'm gonna kind of look at the box note that has been going on for us over here and see what we've got.
Hey, Jason, just to jump in really quick, we had some, I think maybe some connectivity problems, and we weren't able to see some of the websites that you were sharing with us. Can you maybe get out of the PowerPoint and show those websites again?
Oh, for sure. Yep. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm gonna pull down the PowerPoint and then just send the links through the chat box. Is that okay?
Perfect. Mm-hmm.